How's it going, boys? In today's video, we're going to be ranking every assault rifle in BO1 zombies from worst to best. As always, we'll be taking a look at stats as well as my personal input, but as always, the rankings are non-biased and purely stats and viability. Feel free to subscribe to stay updated on these ranking videos, and without wasting any more time, let's get right to it. Taking last place at number 8, we have the G11. Something had to take last place, and unfortunately, the G11 takes it. Most of the ARs in the game aren't too terrible per se in terms of damage, but I definitely do think this is the weakest out of the bunch. It has a base damage of 70 to 100, and when upgraded, 100 to 150, which isn't impressive by any means, but luckily most ARs come with a solid headshot multiplier, and the G11 is no exception with a 4 times headshot multiplier or a 5 times headshot multiplier when upgraded. The fire rate's pretty insane at 1250 rounds per minute, but it being a 3 burst balances it out to 523 rounds per minute overall. And when upgraded, the fire rate remains at 1250 rounds per minute constantly, which is a good thing, I guess. The mag size is quite low like most weapons on this list at 48 in the mag and 144 in reserve, or when upgraded 48 in the mag and 288 in reserve, which is better, but firing at 1250 rounds per minute constantly will make you burn through all that ammo. The reload speed is on the slower side at 2.7 seconds and 3.8 seconds when empty for both versions of the gun. Overall, this gun isn't anything impressive, but I'll give it this. It's a very unique gun and we haven't really seen anything like it since. The scope can be annoying, but I personally like it, and that reload animation is definitely chef's kiss. Taking the number 7 spot is going to be the FAMAS. Now, I know in a previous video I got educated on the FAMAS actually being good against George Romero, but these tier lists are strictly against zombies and it's really only good on one map, so in the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty bad weapon. It has a base damage of 70 to 100 and when upgraded, 100 to 150. Again, nothing special, but the headshot multiplier helps it out with the 4 times headshot multiplier and when upgraded, a 5 times headshot multiplier. The fire rate is the FAMAS's biggest downside with an insane fire rate of 937 rounds per minute. The ammo also doesn't help with the fire rate with the mag size of 30 and 150 in reserve, or when upgraded 45 in the mag and 225 in reserve when upgraded. I will say the reload speed is pretty solid at 2.5 seconds and 3.3 seconds when empty, so there's that at least. Honestly, you could place a FAMAS in dead last or here, it's a personal preference really. The upside is, since the gun has a slower fire rate, you'll at least be able to keep it for a little bit longer even with it having slightly less ammo. Rolling in at number 6, we have the M16. Now most people will say this is the weakest gun on the list. It constantly gets called the worst AR in the game. Now yes, it being a burst weapon plays a part in it, but it's actually not too bad and I think it's better than the other two on the list. It has a base damage of 70 to 100 and 100 to 150 when upgraded. The M16 also has a noob tube with a base damage of 700 on impact and 75 to 400 for blast radius. It again shares a pretty good headshot multiplier of 4 times or when upgraded a 5 times multiplier. The fire rate is the same as a FAMAS at 937 rounds per minute, but it being a burst does balance it out to 459 rounds per minute, which is honestly kinda low, but that's okay. When upgraded, the fire rate does remain at 937 rounds per minute constantly. Now the mag size for the base M16 is pretty shitty at 30 in the mag and 120 in reserve, or when upgraded 30 in the mag and 270 in reserve, along with 9 noob tubes, which I guess is an improvement. I'll give it this, the reload speed is actually pretty nutty at 2 seconds or 2.3 seconds when empty for both versions of the gun. As mid as the gun is, it does have some unique features like turning full auto and it even gets a noob too, so that's bonus points for the M16. Also, anything moving forward is going to be a viable option, so strap in for some hot takes. Coming in at number 5, we have the M14. Now I've made a video on this gun before and I do think it's a highly underrated weapon. It's a weapon we all use, but most people will rarely pack a punch it due to it being a starter gun, but it's actually got some pretty impressive stats. It has a base damage of 80 to 105 and when upgraded 150 to 200, which is just insane for a starter weapon. The headshot multiplier is the highest of all the ARs at a 3 times headshot multiplier, or when upgraded a 6 time headshot multiplier. So if you do manage to hit your shots, you're looking at some pretty serious damage. The fire rate is at a solid 625 rounds per minute, meaning you could pretty much spam this thing as much as you want. Where this gun does struggle in is the ammo at 8 in the mag and 96 in reserve, or when upgraded 16 in the mag and 192 in reserve. But it's a wall weapon, so you can always just go back. The reload speed is quick at 2.4 seconds or 3.4 seconds when empty. Realistically, this gun could be placed higher, but since it's a precision weapon rather than a spray and pray weapon, it takes the number 5 spot. At number 4, we have the most forgotten AR, and it's the AUG. Okay, maybe not forgotten, but most people tend to trade it in for anything higher on the list. It's not really a gun that most people carry for majority of the game. It has a base damage of 90 to 140, or when upgraded, 140 to 200. The AUG also carries a master key, which I feel like most people forget about, with a base damage of 240 per pellet, which is 8, giving you a max damage of 1920. The headshot multiplier, like most ARs, is good with a headshot multiplier of 4 times or 5 times when upgraded. The fire rate is quite high at 937 rounds per minute like the FAMAS, but unlike the FAMAS, it has the ammo to back it up. Speaking of ammo, it has a mag size of 30 and 270 in reserve, and when upgraded, 30 in the mag and 390 in reserve. As for the master key, it has 6 in the mag and 30 in reserve. The reload speed is pretty average for ARs at 2.6 seconds or 3 seconds when empty. If you forgot about the AUG and boot up some zombies, I definitely recommend trying the AUG again. This gun really has a lot going for it, and it's one of the few weapons that has a damaging attachment. At number 3, we have my personal favorite assault rifle, and it's the FN FAL. Now I struggled with ranking this weapon, but I think this is a pretty fair spot for it. It's almost a near perfect weapon, but it does have its downsides. It has the highest base damage out of all the ARs with an insane 130 to 160 damage, or when upgraded an even more insane 180 to 240 damage. If that isn't damage, I honestly don't know what is. And paired with the insane headshot multiplier Treyarch gave the ARs, it's even more broken with the 4 times headshot multiplier or a 5 times headshot multiplier when upgraded. The fire rate is also pretty good at 625 rounds per minute, allowing most players to just spam that trigger finger. When upgraded, the fire rate does stay the same, but since it turns into a burst weapon, it balances out at 368 rounds per minute, which is kinda disappointing. The FAL's ammo is actually on the higher end at 30 in the mag and 180 in reserve, and when upgraded, 30 in the mag and 360 in reserve. As for the reload speed, it's actually better than the M14 somehow at 2.5 seconds and 3.1 seconds when empty. Like I said, this gun is an almost perfect weapon and can be number 1 depending on your playstyle, but most people just prefer to spray and pray rather than line your shots up, which to be fair, is overall easier. For all the FAL haters, hopefully this changes your perspective on the gun. Coming in almost first place at number 2, we have the Commando. Now, I love the Commando, you love the Commando, it just is what it is. Even if it were a bad weapon, the looks of this weapon would instantly make it top tier. It has a base damage of 100 to 150, and when upgraded, 150 to 210. The headshot multiplier is the same 4 times or 5 times headshot multiplier when upgraded. It fires at a solid 750 rounds per minute, which I think is the sweet spot for assault rifles. The mag size on the Commando is also good, not even just for BO1 standards, but in general at 30 in the mag and 270 in reserve, or when upgraded, 40 in the mag and 360 in reserve. Which, to be honest, they could have bumped it up just a tad, but it is what it is. The reload speed is among the highest for most weapons at a 2-second reload time or 2.5 seconds when empty. But when upgraded, the reload speed does go down to 1.7 seconds or 2.1 seconds when empty. Oddly enough, for how good this thing is, I don't really see too many people carry this gun into the later rounds. It just kinda gets overshadowed by the HK and Galil combo, but the Commando is actually a pretty solid weapon for those early rounds and even in the later rounds. And on top of that, this gun just looks amazing. Speaking of the Galil, at number 1, we have the Galil. Are we all really surprised? I mean, it's the Galil. As much as I despise this weapon along with most of the weapons that are number 1, I can't deny this thing's a beast. It has one of the highest damage outputs not just for assault rifles but for any gun that isn't a wonder weapon, with a base damage of 100 to 150 or when upgraded 150 to 220. And to make this even more broken, they give it the same headshot multiplier as their other assault rifles at 4 times or 5 times when upgraded. The fire rate is peak at 750 rounds per minute, which when it's paired with the ammo makes for the perfect gun with the maxes of 35 and 315 in reserve, or when upgraded, 35 in the mag and 490 in reserve. That's basically entering LMG territory for ammo. The reload speed is slow though at 2.8 seconds and 3.8 seconds when empty, which I guess they had to give it a bad quality. The Galil isn't really my cup of tea due to it being overused, but yeah. It really wasn't much of a surprise to most of us that this would be taking the number 1 spot. Laser beam, high damage, high ammo, I mean, you can't go wrong with this thing. That's gonna do it for today's ranking video, lads. Hope you all enjoyed. As always, if you guys disagreed with any of the rankings on this list, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you want to see any more ranking videos on a gun category or just top 5s in general, also feel free to leave it in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to stay updated, and if you want to leave a like, hey man, it's up to you. Take it easy boys, and I'll see you all in the next one. BAM!